Welcome to the world of The Purge, a series where, in the near future, all crime is legal for one night a year. Not only that, but all police, fire, and other emergency services are suspended. So there's nothing to stop you from committing any crime, including murder. We're told that the poor are the most victimized during this night, since the rich can afford security systems that keep them safe from the bands of marauding purgers. But money turns out to be no substitute for common sense, as both purgers and victims make some stupid decisions that get them killed. The first big mistake comes before the night even begins. James Sandin is a security system sales rep. Not only is his home equipped with one of these security systems, but so are the homes of all of his neighbors. You'd think that they'd love James for providing them with the best home security, but, well, we'll get back to that. Anyway, the first big mistake. James walks into his house, checks to make sure that his entire family is safe inside, and doesn't immediately turn on the security system. Now, if you knew that there would be murder mobs walking the streets come nightfall, you'd probably want to seal up your home as quickly as possible. In fact, you'd probably choose to work from home that day so that you didn't get stuck in traffic. Regardless, as soon as you were indoors, that security system would be turned on. But not James. Nope. First, he has the whole family sit down for dinner, asking everyone how their day went. Eventually, it's his son Charlie who points out that it's 6:57, and seeing as the entire nation will be plunged into chaos at 7 o'clock, maybe his father should turn on the security system that keeps the family from dying. James is so supremely confident in his security system that he doesn't even bother to test it before punching in the activation code seconds before the purge begins. Obviously, it's a good idea to let everyone in your family know the code that activates the home security system. But something you probably wouldn't do is also let your children see where you keep the gun safe. And you sure wouldn't let them see you type in the combination code to that gun safe. James lets his family know that he keeps a few guns in the house just in case the top-of-the-line security system fails. And once we see what that system includes, well, we don't blame him for the extra precautions. Turns out that his top-of-the-line security system is a bit less than advertised. In fact, besides the steel shutters that come down over the windows, there doesn't seem to be anything to it. And what we said earlier about turning on the security system as soon as possible. It turns out that would have been a good idea for more than just the purge. Because while the Sandins were having dinner, Zoe's boyfriend Henry was sneaking into the house and hiding out in her bedroom until after the security system was turned on. Seriously, this isn't even a purge precaution. Just lock your doors at night. So, as the purge gets underway, Charlie watches the video monitors showing what's happening outside of the house. And he sees a man running through the streets, begging someone to let him in. Of course, it could be a trick to get access to some victims, but the guy looks pretty bloody. So, Charlie deactivates the security system, yelling for the man to get into the house before James can reactivate it. James reacts the way most of us would react if we found a bloody stranger in our home. He's nervous, but he doesn't immediately shoot the man. But this is when Henry decides to confront James about his relationship with Zoe. See, James doesn't want Henry dating his daughter because Henry is a couple years older than Zoe, who's still in high school. So, Henry comes up with the plan to sneak into the Sandins' house on purge night, shoot James, then continue dating Zoe without any trouble? Now, a couple of bad decisions happen all at once. James doesn't immediately go after Henry. Zoe stays with Henry, even though he just shot her father. In fact, the only person who makes a good decision at this point is the bloody stranger, who realizes that this house is crazier than what's happening outdoors and slips away to find a place to hide. We never learn a lot about the stranger, besides the fact that he's homeless and was attacked by a band of purgers. We also see that he's wearing a set of dog tags around his neck, letting us know that he was in the military at some point. We never even learn his name. Since the Sandins live in a gated community, we know that the stranger wasn't sleeping on the street outside their house. This means that he must have been attacked in another neighborhood and, instead of searching for shelter in a familiar place, chose instead to walk into a community where he knew nobody and had no reason to expect anyone to help him. But let's shift gears to consider Henry's, well, plan. If you're legally an adult and dating a minor, don't. But if you wanted to continue a relationship with a woman, even though her father forbade you to do so, you might decide to discuss it with him and allay his concerns. You might decide to continue seeing her in secret without letting her father know, or you might decide to shoot her father dead in front of her and her family. But instead of immediately going after Zoe, James decides instead to get his wife and son into a safe place. The rec room. Sure, if you were a security expert, you probably would have had a panic room installed in your house. But it never occurred to James that anyone would actually try to break into his home. Which is unfortunate, because the Purgers who attacked the stranger are now knocking on the Sandins' front door. James may have shown a monumental lack of foresight, with Henry and the stranger coming up with stupid plans of their own. But the Purgers are a whole other kind of stupid. They walk right into a gated community, where they know everyone is wealthy and obviously armed, then just knock on an armored door and start making threats. And what are they wearing? Prep school uniforms and white dresses, instead of, say, the bulletproof vests that you would wear. In fact, no one in this film thinks to wear a bulletproof vest, even though half of the deaths that occur could have been prevented with them. Why don't the Purgers simply let the stranger go and find someone else to harass? The homeless are targeted because they tend to be unarmed and defenseless, but this guy is now holed up in a house that is seemingly a fortress, along with a family that certainly has guns to defend themselves. The first thing they do is cut the power line to the house. Fortunately, James has hooked up a backup emergency generator, but it's only hooked up to the security monitors. You might have decided, if you had the foresight to hook up a backup generator in the first place, to hook it up to all of the lights in the house. But James only thought to hook it up to his wonderful security system, which we now learn is really not all that great. James tells his wife and son all of the ways that someone could still break into the house. In possibly the dumbest decision of the movie, James decides to find the stranger, subdue him, and give him to the Purgers so that they'll leave the family alone. We are given no reason to believe that once he opens the door to his house, they won't simply come in and kill everyone anyway. James then makes a bad plan even worse by suggesting that he and Mary split up so that they can search the house more quickly. Sure, they have guns, but the Purgers have specified that they want the stranger turned over alive, making those guns fairly worthless, especially since they're now in the dark. Meanwhile, Henry has died on the floor of Zoe's bedroom, at least providing her with a gun of her own. So she joins in on the plan, hunting for a desperate stranger in a dark house. It goes as well as expected, with the stranger overpowering Zoe, taking the gun out of her hand, and taking her hostage. And now James is in a spot. If he shoots the stranger, he might hit his daughter by accident. Also, he might accidentally kill the stranger instead of just wounding him. In fact, the only reason the stranger gets overtaken is because Mary walks into the room behind him, and she manages to tackle him, along with Henry's help. James and Mary tie the man's hands and feet together, then try to tie him to a chair so that they can drag the chair to the front door. Instead of, just grabbing him by the feet and dragging him to the front door. Curiously, they also gag him. Why? It's not as if he's going to cry for help. At this point, they discuss what they should do with him. At this point. Not, say, before they begin hunting for him. And now, James decides that he can't send an innocent man to die, even if it means risking his own family's safety. Fortunately, he must have seen the stranger's dog tags when he was tying him up, meaning that he not only knows the man's name, but also knows that he has military-level combat training. That sort of experience will be invaluable when the Purgers finally break in, except nobody bothers to untie the stranger. They just leave him tied to a chair while they spread out like morons. Yes, they split up once again, despite how bad it worked the last time. Zoe hides under her bed. James goes to the front of the house. Mary goes to the back of the house. Strangest of all, Charlie is given a gun and told to hide in the basement. Fortunately, the Purgers are even dumber than the Sandins. because they're standing on the front porch, screaming about how they're going to rip the front door off its hinges. They have a truck and a length of chain that they attach to the door. Somehow, there's just one problem. The front door is made of steel, but there's a slot at eye level where they can see each other. So, while they're standing on the porch yelling, it would be very easy for James to aim a gun through that slot and just start shooting. Sure, he might not get them all, but he'd thin out their numbers. And if they're firing back, the steel door will provide pretty good cover. Well, that's what you would do. But James chooses to step away from the door and just stand there like an idiot while the Purgers rip it down. So, to give a breakdown of the Sandins' plan, James is guarding the front entrance. Great job, James. Mary is stumbling around the back of the house, which is still dark. Looks secure. Charlie is alone in the basement, clutching a gun which he's probably never fired or even held before. That should end well. And Zoe is hiding under her bed. No way they'll think to look there. And the stranger? The man whom the Sandins decided to protect? Still tied to the chair. He should be fine. But consider, what if the 5 of them stayed together, each holding a gun that was pointed at the door? The whole thing might be over before a single Purger enters the house. And this is such an obvious strategy that even the Purgers seem to have anticipated it, as tearing off the front door is just a distraction, while the rest of them fan out around the house and begin prying the shutters off the windows. Fortunately, James installed surveillance cameras around the house, so it's easy for someone to monitor the situation and see what they're doing. Unfortunately, nobody is doing that. That's right. The only thing in the house that James bothered to hook to a backup generator, and he's not bothering to use it. So, Charlie gets found immediately and is about to get stabbed when James runs into the basement and shoots the Purger in the back. It almost looks as if Charlie would have been safer if he'd stuck with his father. Let's start a running counter of the number of people who might have survived with only a couple of broken ribs if they'd worn bulletproof vests. How's Zoe doing? Still hiding under her bed. And despite it being the only hiding place in the room, no one bothers to check. Back to the father of the year, James has left Charlie in the rec room to watch the monitors, which of course is pointless, since the monitors only show what's outside and all of the Purgers are now inside. Then he wanders back out into the hallway and immediately shoots another Purger. For some reason, the sound of gunfire doesn't draw any of the other Purgers' attention. It certainly doesn't seem to worry the ones who aren't carrying guns of their own. To be fair, not all of them are shot. One of them is run through with an axe, which a vest wouldn't have stopped. Unfortunately, James got used to Purgers just walking casually into rooms. So when he's leaving the billiard room, one of the Purgers is waiting behind the door and runs him through with a knife. But in a classic horror movie goof, the Purger pulls his knife out of James and leaves the room, assuming that he's dead from a knife to the stomach, without checking for a pulse. James was even holding a shotgun that the Purger could have taken to deliver a headshot. Because when you're in a horror movie, Meanwhile, Charlie is waiting to die in the rec room, watching the outdoor monitors. The Purge team left 2 people outside the house, apparently to kill anyone who might try to escape. Unfortunately for them, they're so busy looking at the house that they don't notice 2 of the Sandins' neighbors walk up behind them and shoot them both. Mary's not doing much better than her husband, having been ambushed by 2 of the Purgers, who are also shot and killed by her neighbors, who leave her with the corpses without even bothering to ask if she's alright. As Mary hears more gunshots ringing through the house, she fumbles around until she finds James lying on the floor, alive but bleeding out. Even though she doesn't know if all of the Purgers are dead yet, she yells for her son Charlie to join them. Not her daughter, though. Nice. Unfortunately, one Purger is still left alive and is getting ready to shoot James, Mary, and Charlie, when Zoe appears and fires a half-dozen shots into his chest. It's a badass move for Zoe, who's pretty much been crying and hiding under a bed for the last third of this movie. But then it gets ruined when Zoe drops the gun and runs to join her mother, father, and brother crouched on the floor. Nobody thinks to wrap James's stomach with a shirt or use some of the duct tape that they were tying the stranger up with to bind the wound in any way. So, James dies what appears to have been a completely avoidable death because nobody studied first aid. And then the neighbors come into the room, telling Mary that they saw the Purgers breaking into the house and decided to help. And it's all very sweet. For about 3 seconds. At which point, the neighbors let her know that they were planning to kill her family and didn't want someone else to beat them to it. It turns out that the home security systems that James is selling are extremely expensive, and as the Purgers demonstrated, the systems were also very easy to break through. So the neighbors are feeling exploited and maybe a bit ripped off. And they're getting ready for a ritual sacrifice of Mary, Zoe, and Charlie. But then the bloody stranger shows up and shoots one of them in the chest before taking another one hostage. Rather than killing the rest of the neighbors, Mary decides to bring them into the dining room and simply stare at them for hours until the purge is over. So, the rest of the night passes peacefully, except for the one neighbor who gets her nose broken. So, how do you survive purge night? If you're homeless, don't try to hide in the suburbs. Find an abandoned building to hide in for the night. If you're participating in the purge, wear a bulletproof vest, making sure to choose something that fits comfortably. A bullet will still hurt, but it won't kill you, and you should be able to hold out with a broken rib for 12 hours when the hospitals open back up. Also, stick to the streets. Going into houses, or even a seemingly abandoned building, is just asking for trouble. Which brings us to what you should do if you're staying home for the purge. Definitely lock your doors, but don't waste your money on one of James Sandin's security systems. They're crap. Instead, watch the Home Alone movies, some old episodes of Scooby-Doo, and the abominable Dr. Phibes, then brainstorm ideas for death traps you can litter in and around your home. A grown-up Kevin McAllister would own Purge Night. Finally, make sure that you don't vote for candidates who want to legalize all crime. But then, if these are the guys who got elected, what did the losing candidates promise to do?